Last year, I raised $30,000 from my community for my ice cream business. Not from investors and not from a bank loan, from regular people who wanted to invest in a local business. I used a platform called Honeycomb Credit, which allows businesses to take loans from investors in their community. It ended up being a very positive experience for me, but there were also a few trade-offs, and I'll get to those later in the video. So here's how it worked, with the pros and cons that I discovered along the way. When I started working on my ice cream business, I knew that I needed seed capital to get started. There were a few big pieces of equipment I needed to get my business off the ground: a commercial batch freezer, an ice cream cart, and a few other small supplies. But I didn't want to go the traditional funding route. I considered applying for an SBA microloan, but all of the paperwork and the fees gave me pause. And honestly, as a brand new business idea, I didn't even know if I would qualify. Crowdfunding platforms like GoFundMe and Kickstarter didn't seem like a right fit either, because I wasn't ready to offer people a product, and I didn't feel comfortable just asking for free money. I also didn't want to bring on investors. This was a very new idea, and I didn't want any pressure from outside investors. It was already complex enough. So I started looking for something that felt like a middle ground. Then I found Honeycomb Credit. Honeycomb Credit is basically community-based lending. Instead of a bank giving you a loan, people in your community can invest smaller amounts. In my case, I raised $30,000 to support Fabled Ice Cream. One thing I liked about Honeycomb Credit was how fast it was. Once everything was approved, I got the campaign set up quickly, and I was able to start fundraising. Another big benefit was the community aspect. The campaign itself became a way to talk about the business. My investors were going to be my customers in the future. The people who became investors were some of my biggest supporters. They follow along with the project, tell their friends about it, and genuinely want to see the business succeed. That kind of early buy-in is crucial for a small business. I also had a great experience working with the Honeycomb Credit team. They were easy to work with and helpful throughout the process. It ended up being a very valuable experience for me as a founder. But there were definitely a few trade-offs. The biggest was the interest rate. My loan ended up being around 11% interest, which is higher than what you might get from a traditional bank loan. For me, because the loan was relatively small and I needed the cash quickly, it was worth it. I've thought about refinancing the loan since then, but I'm not sure if it's worth the trouble. Another thing to keep in mind is that discoverability is mostly your responsibility. Honeycomb Credit requires you to hit a minimum fundraising amount before they'll list you on their platform. So you can't just launch the campaign and expect strangers to find it. You need to rely on your own network. All in all, though, it was a very positive experience. I learned a lot about fundraising. I got the capital I needed to get my batch freezer, but maybe the best part is now I have a group of people who are invested in my company. And for a small business, that support is pretty powerful. So if you're starting a business and you're thinking about going this route, I'd actually highly recommend it, especially if you already have a community around you, even a small one. I'll link Honeycomb Credit down below in case you're interested. And if you have questions about how the campaign worked or what I spent the money on, leave a comment below. I read every single one, and I'm happy to do a follow-up video if there's interest. Also, if you haven't already, subscribe. I'm documenting the whole journey of building Fabled Ice Cream from scratch, the wins, the setbacks, and everything in between. I'll see you in the next one.